it is true that to many people, if you start talking about big topics like HS2 or this, that, the other, maybe they're not that interested, but they're interested in how it affects them. And there are definitely ways. There are local stations, there are jobs and all these different things. And I think, of course, there are lots of innovations in how you can do consultation. You can use VR, AR, immersive environments, all these things in order to model things. But it's not just about technology. And what I'm hoping is that we can have some ideas about how we can actually build that type of community engagement into our thinking and our projects in Manchester in a different way.
Well, I think probably looking at, or just fundamentally and simply understanding what do the distinctive communities need, and where is it that they come together naturally, where those enhanced replacements or missing facilities should be created. It's kind of relatively simple to look at and think, well, actually, if all of the bus routes for that community come together on this particular high street, that's where your infrastructure needs to be. That's where your pharmacy needs to be. That's where your kind of health centre needs to be.
That's not what we've discovered. We've discovered that actually you need to speak to the people that live there and find out what their journeys are actually.
No, absolutely.
Because
where are people going?
I mean, if it involves talking to people directly and finding out what their experience is, that's fine. But the presumptions that we made as designers when we went into all of the areas we worked at, most of those turned out to be incorrect, or correct for a particular section of the population, not for another. And it's really about a very fine grain and continually kind of engaged approach, I think. And the whole city is moving that way. The Our Manchester approach has restructured health and social care to try and work it down to a series of 12 neighbourhoods. At the moment, we're still talking about neighbourhoods being 50,000 people, though, which is still a bit of a big organism from my perspective. So, we're trying to work with segments of population which are maybe 3,000 people or 4,000 people in those neighbourhoods, because the vast majority of people in that neighbourhood are really able to engage if they wish. Parents and employed people, so the children and older people, out of work. People who are out of work, those are the ones that aren't kind of getting any voice, and the ones with the worst health outcomes.
Absolutely. You say the health outcomes for people who live even 2 miles apart are vastly different, depending on the particular place that they live, the socio-economic background and so on. The disparity there is pretty huge.
But the fine grain at the moment comes down to using the index of multiple deprivation. So the local care organisation, which has got £6.8 billion, is currently using that as the way that they're going to distribute the portion of funding across the city. If you look within one ward, you can clearly see that the life experience of people was very different from one side of the ward to another, depending on those kind of circumstances. And it's pretty simple, the kind of mapping techniques that Rob's team use and we use as well, to really pinpoint where people with multiple risks, which are spatial, kind of exist. But then when you actually start talking to people, you realise the experience can be quite particular and unpredictable, like using a bus and going to Stockport instead of into Manchester.
All you're really talking about is two different sorts of data.
But
you need both, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a big mix. I mean, when we've looked at the health intelligence, which is big data, you get one picture, and then when you look at finer grain, you kind of start to think, well, maybe that's not the case for everyone. And then, if you do start knocking on doors or things like that, and getting people to fill out surveys and getting people to come to workshops, that's a whole other set of things. But actually, then the kind of consultation you're talking about, where the people are not, I think you mentioned it, kind of placemaking, where people are being asked what do they want to see. So they're not being said, what kind of station furniture would you like on the platform, and would you like the platform here or here? It's actually, what kind of dynamic transport systems are going to serve the needs of you as you get older. Or
we were involved in a project like that from exactly kind of what you're talking about, starting from the very beginning, deliberately in North Shields, which was an old dockyard, and as a design proposition for us, it was a fantastic site next to the river, the chance to kind of reinvigorate the community. When we sat down and actually talk to people, and this was in a kind of a competitive environment. This is us effectively bidding to win the work. We thought maybe that we'd got it wrong because we turned up with nothing apart from some pens and a piece of paper. And we sat down with local stakeholders, and what we found actually was that the amount of emotional investment that people had in that place, which had been derelict for 20 years, and used to be literally the beating heart of that community. You know, had a bell that sounded that people went to work and then went home. Was so much more important than anything else to start with, to start the conversation. And then we started talking about the things that you're talking about, which is how to get to school. Are there enough schools? If we're going to bring 200 new homes here, is there enough healthcare? Do we need to think about doctor's surgeries? And for us as architects, and it's probably different for everybody's different experience, and designers, it's very rare to get that kind of totally bottom-up kind of exposure and opportunity. And when you get it, it's fantastic. And you can really work with individuals within the group, and everybody is invested in that as a place because they're already, you know, it's part of their community anyway. It's something that everybody has a desire to participate in, and it comes back to what you were saying. To get people to participate in something, there has to be an incentive. You know, because if people feel that they're just having something handed to them, or it's a government or a local authority problem that needs to be solved, they're not necessarily going to volunteer their opinion or their expertise. You have to sort of go out and seek it and almost find ways to encourage people to participate. And that kind of event is a really good way of doing it. But it takes a very forward-thinking client body to actually...
That's rare. That's a rare process. Yeah. But if the argument is it's reducing risk for whoever that client body is and whoever's investing, right? And if you can demonstrate it reduces risk, that maybe it's different conversations with different people within that infrastructure that is going to actually do that, make whatever insertion into the city, whatever that decision making is.
I think they're afraid then.
Yeah.
To kind of do that because they do see it as exposure, and I think the tools that you've just described are ones that we've used on Project Bro. We've been lucky enough to do it from the start.
Yeah.
So the kind of tools you use at that stage, whether it's kind of memory maps or kind of route mapping, idea mapping, canvas cards, whatever, are very, very different to the tools that you use when you kind of ship in a bit later on in the process.
No, absolutely. I think sometimes the things you latch onto as a designer, which seem kind of, you know, a little bit shiny and exciting and dynamic, to somebody who lives there locally might be a completely ridiculous intervention to make and a waste of money and something that isn't going to help them in any way in their everyday life.
It takes a lot longer. It's a big investment, but I think for the projects where we have been able to start early on, it's been tremendously worthwhile. And I think, like you say, it's a rare client that will invest at that.
It is, and I think there's a little bit of kind of education, because ultimately most particularly sort of developer-led schemes, even quite large schemes, now the client body, the client group is in it for the long term. So they realise that they're trying to build something to be there hopefully longer than we will, and to be a successful place. I think unless you therefore take that ideology and realise that architecture and the creation of the insertion of new spaces and places within existing urban fabrics is a very, very long-term thing. You know, it's not a quick fix. It takes time and it takes management, and some bits might need adjusting as you go through the process. So for us, our experience of that is that it's we're only part of the way through that process, and I hope it will be really successful as a result. But it may be another 20 years before we really know.
I think one thing is maybe redefining what infrastructure is. And if we define infrastructure as like something that is to help us live our lives in the most satisfying way or happy way or whatever, it brings different connotations to infrastructure. And then you can start building a sense of community, which I think almost what we've been saying is that the problem with participate is that a lot of people don't identify with the community they live, and it's because we don't have the tools or the spaces. I mean, how many creative spaces do we have in the regional center? Very few. You cannot, and we cannot show people images, all the good work, the superimposing images above different futures. We don't have those spaces and those ways of engaging the community, and we don't have that, then we cannot create that sense of community. We did with Paul, we have run innovation spaces with young people, and this group did a virtual bus stop. Basically, they created on an app as a place for the community. So around that stop, community stop, you could see what was happening around the community, from the guys advertising the bread to the events, and maybe what we need to find is a way of creating that sense of community somehow through and then people start participating.
It does seem when you're talking about that we should really be harnessing not just our personalities and the great feelings that we have as architects to help communities, but using technology, being able to use that as a technical tool in exactly the same way as we use AutoCAD or whatever it is. I mean, it's a route to get somewhere. And what you're talking about, creating community hubs with information, that requires somebody managing data and keeping it up to date and making it relevant and community input on. But is this something you're already doing?
We've got a trial running at the moment, the City Bird project. It's a project called PlaceCal, and
Place what?
PlaceCal.
Cal. I thought
Tom's
you said-
responsible for the
I thought you
name,
said
but
Cal.
no, I
It's
didn't.
short for place calendar. That's what it's short for.
Yeah.
Place cal.
PlaceCal. So one of the things we've done when we've gone asset mapping in the community is we did it. A lot of the asset mapping was done with the community, and one of the things we did to figure out what was happening was create a calendar of all the events that were on. So we've got this massive calendar, we've got everything on, and every time we did a workshop, we asked people to add in the things that were missing, and so we found out about tiny little knitting groups and things like that. So it's very fine grain again, but it also had the library events and etc. on it. The reason for doing that kind of collective calendar is because there were lots of things going on, but most people in different groups didn't know what was happening, because the Afro-Caribbean Care Centre only publishes a calendar amongst people that already come or their relatives and friends. So none of those events are then open, and they all have trouble recruiting, no one knows what's going on, etc. So that's the need. And so we did it centrally, and it's quite a lot of effort, as you can imagine, but it gave us connections to everybody. Now what we're trying to do is use technology to automate it, create a platform to share all of the calendar feeds. And what we're doing is we're doing it around events, so it's not around venues, or it's around kind of events. Because, for example, Big Life Centre have got 3 different venues, but they weren't doing a calendar because they saw themselves as a Big Life Centre. But when you're accessing an event at a Cathlock Centre, you don't care whether Big Life are running it or not. You just want to go to the yoga class. So we're running it about events, and that immediately opens it up. And so we just set up the pilot on that now. But the point of that is that it's mostly self-sustaining. So most of our effort on that is actually going around all the community groups and increasing their technological capacity so that they can contribute to it. One of the key things that we found is comes back to people being invested in something. So normally people are invested in a particular technology. Most applications are the kind of buzzword application. They're trying to attract people to participate in a new form of technology or something that. So using existing platforms and systems. So we're taking Facebook links, calendar, Google Calendar, any other kind of standard calendars. But then also hard copy calendars. We're training people who've got a hard copy calendar to use Google Calendar, for example.
I find that I'm just listening to this. As you're talking, I'm thinking, my great aunt Sophie, who used to live in a part of the East End of London, she was Facebook for that part of London. All the stuff you're talking about, she had in her head. People wanted to know what was going on in the house. They went to see her. She knew everybody. She knew their entire family, all their histories, and who was meeting what and whom, and who was having a party, and whose birthday it was, and everything. So actually, maybe some of this heritage, which we've been talking about, the sort of historical stuff, is not going to be needed so much. I mean, it's taking that and putting it somewhere else and letting it be open. How do you keep it personal?
Well, there are two things we're seeing. The processes that we go through to create that calendar, we're seeing as a methodology that you were going to do asset mapping in an area. Like I said before, there were 11 groups, different groups. So we've tried to create a methodology. So you've now currently got, say, Buzz, who do the health and social care. They've been commissioned to do asset mapping because they're trying to move towards a health creation model. But once they've gone out and talked to a load of people and done the kind of participatory inquiry and these kind of creative workshops, and they found out people think all these things, they then got a tablecloth with a load of scribbles on, and they don't know what they're trying to gather. So, that happens a lot, right? And we've all done that, I'm sure. So one of the things we're doing is we're trying, through doing this quite a lot, we've been trying to pin down what the key bits of information are that you might want to keep and collect. And so we're sharing that with Buzz. But the calendar is like the basic spine. We basically used it as a Trojan horse to try and bring together groups, get the key information together. But we see it as there's lots of things that can easily be added onto it. So our partnerships are a membership partnership. So you could easily do this so that every time you go to an event, you check in with your membership card. And if someone hasn't been to any events for a while, it would give an alert to one of their friends or their nominated relatives or something like that. There's lots of things you could do. So we're seeing it as a kind of social media platform for real world interactions, if you like, for people with low social capital.